That I am not affected by what I see. I see everything. I know everything. I know the wickedness in your heart.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Wow. So that's the Christian one lady Christian nationalist response to Charlie Kirk's death, speaking in tongues, and and it's growing. It's a lot of people feeling like that. Social media is going crazy about the Charlie Kirk situation. The left, the right, everybody up in arms. Topics like freedom of speech, topics like what should be tastefully allowed to be aired, or seen on social media. People are losing their jobs because of saying uh, construed things of hate speech against Charlie Kirk. You know, being glad that he died, being glad that what happened. It's considered hateful. People are getting fired from their jobs because of it. The other argument is that Christian nationalism is a form of hate speech as an organization. That's the case being made there. So, what are the facts? What can we really understand about this movement, Christian nationalism? Well, it's an ideology that combines like narrow sort of interpretations of Christianity, literalism, with nationalistic identity, promoting beliefs that the United States was founded as a Christian nation and that we must remain governed by biblical values, whatever that means. So, if you look into it, you'll see that its roots can be traced back to the early 20th century when fundamentalist leaders like Gerald L.K. Smith and his organization, or organizations like the Christian Identity Movement, they began to explicitly link like Protestantism with white racial dominance. So while Christian faith itself has a lot of different expressions, you can think about the KKK, Catholicism, everything in between. There's like, 6,000 something different denominations. But Christian nationalism distorts it into a political weapon that sort of elevates just one race, one culture, and one religion above all others. So, at its core, it teaches that true American identity and Christian identity is synonymous with being white and Christian, of course. So, the beliefs of Christian nationalists would include the conviction that the U.S. Constitution is divinely inspired, that secular governance undermines God's will, and that minorities, immigrants, and non-Christians threaten the moral fabric of the nation. And that over time, these ideas have aligned closely with white supremacist movements, right? conspiracies as the so-called white genocide, the Great Replacement theory, both of which falsely claim that white Christians are being deliberately replaced by an influx of immigrants and minorities. And this idea has spread, to all of its adherents. And so these ideas, although baseless, provide that ideological fuel for exclusion, resentment, violence, hate speech, all of these things. And Charlie Kirk was an outspoken white nationalist or a Christian nationalist. But the consequences of it are not really abstract. They're kind of deadly if you think about it. History shows that its narratives have been used to justify lynchings, segregation, mass shooting, terrorist attacks, carried out by those who see themselves as defenders of white Christian America. And so by dehumanizing non-white people and labeling them as threats, Christian nationalists attempt to rationalize this kind of intimidation and violence. And so this toxic mixture of, say, religious language and this racial supremacy has led to a lot of harm against communities of color, immigrants, religious minorities, and even activists like Charlie Kirk. It's blowback. It creates an atmosphere of people who can't stand that sort of white nationalist, Christian nationalist, white supremacy messaging. And then when, people lash out irrationally, like by shooting someone, which is terrible and evil and should be condemned, white nationalists look at it like a war. Like, oh, it's time for war now, right? They look at it like, something's got to be done. We've got to fight hard. We've got to defend our rights. That's the narrative. And I'm not making it up. Like, they create entire speeches around it. Like Stephen Miller, who's also a Christian nationalist speaker, well known. He has a few things to say about this, and we'll kind of look at what he's got to say and try to interpret, dissect exactly what this person is saying.
We have arisen in all of us because we stand for what is good, what is virtuous, what is noble. And to those trying to incite violence against us, those trying to foment hatred against us, what do you have? You have nothing. You are nothing. You are wickedness, you are jealousy, you are envy, you are hatred. You are nothing. You can build nothing. You can produce nothing. You can create nothing. We are the ones who build. We are the ones who create. We are the ones who lift up humanity.
So the question is, who are the we and who is he talking about? Who are they? Now, he talks about lineage, and we'll kind of dissect that as well, but we'll get into it.
And our enemies cannot comprehend our strength, our determination, our resolve, our passion. Our lineage and our legacy hails back to Athens, to Rome, to Philadelphia, to Monticello. Our ancestors built the cities. They produced the art and architecture. They built the industry. Erica stands on the shoulders of thousands of years of warriors, of women who raised up families, raised up city, raised up industry, raised up civilization, who pulled us out of the caves and the darkness into the light. The light will defeat the dark. We will prevail over the forces of wickedness and evil. They cannot imagine what they have awakened. They cannot conceive of the army that they have arisen in all of us. Because we stand for what is good, what is virtuous, what is noble. And to those trying to incite violence against us, those trying to foment hate.
Yeah. So yeah, who is he referring to? Well, he's a white nationalist, so it should be obvious, right? They've defined those things. People that aren't really familiar may not understand. Maybe he's talking in vague terms or whatever they may say. But when he talks about, um, the light, rising up against the darkness, you know, this is talking about white folks rising up against immigrants, minorities, and non-Christians who are the enemy. And they are the one who was awakened through this act of violence with Charlie Kirk, is what he's alluding to. And so, the consequences of this Christian nationalism is going to be deadly. Like I say, they dehumanized non-white people and labeled them as threats. That's what he's doing here. Christian nationalists attempt to rationalize intimidation and violence, but they're very careful with their words. The Constitution does protect hate speech after all, but it doesn't protect incitement to violence. And so that's where you have to be really careful. So, human rights organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center, the Anti-Defamation League, these groups have consistently documented and condemned these extremist movements. And they warn that Christian nationalism remains a powerful force fueling hate crimes and domestic terrorism. So all they're really doing is cloaking white supremacy in the language of faith and patriotism. It spreads dangerous falsehoods and threatens democracy, human rights, the very principle of religious freedom. They don't believe in the separation. And so when you understand its origins, beliefs, and consequences, then you can understand why resisting that spread is crucial. And we have to affirm a vision of America that's inclusive, pluralistic, and just. Thank God that most Christians don't fall into this category. Most Christians are not Christian nationalists. They're not fundamentalists. But these are a loud minority. And they're growing. And they're all over the place, spewing their hatred and their messaging and things like that. So, what do you do? Outlaw these people? What do you do? Silence them? No. My whole thing is let's talk. Let's discuss. I'm with Charlie Kirk on that. Let's have an open dialogue. Let's talk about all these things. That's why I have a show, for example. My little small fledgling little YouTube channel is open as a platform to talk about all kinds of things, including like this topic as well, especially when, the antidote is pretty clear to me. Reason and being rational, being logical, being ethical. That's going to be the solution to white nationalism and Christian nationalism. And so what I do is I invite Christians to come on just for the sake of those who are straddling the line, those who may not be sure, or those who are kind of wondering whether Christianity is for them. I say, get on my show. Let's debate these things. Let's debate these topics. I don't really have a problem with believing in God. I don't have a problem with even being a Christian. In fact, if it works for you, I encourage it. But what I would like to do is address some of this fundamentalism and literalism and just show you within the Bible itself that not all of that stuff is obviously God inspired, if any of it at all. It's full of contradictions. Christianity is sort of a huge sharpshooter fallacy, ad hoc reasoning, rationality. Jesus didn't fulfill any of the prophecies. He wasn't even in the line of David to be a king as prophesied that the Messiah would be. We can see all this stuff in the Bible. You know, the Old Testament endorses slavery, you know, murdering uh, possibly innocent, you know, of course, innocent young girls for not bleeding on their marriage night, genocide, um, you know, supremacy. I mean, this is this is the root of where all this stuff comes from. This Christian nationalism is rooted into these fundamentalist kind of thinking. And it's easy to refute it. It's easy to destroy it. Of course, the people who are true believers will never care about what your evidence is or whether you point out the contradictions, the internal critique of their worldview is self-refuting, all of that stuff. They don't care. They don't care because they feel great, feeling superior. That's the real motivation behind the Christian nationalists. They just want to feel superior than everyone else. And so no amount of evidence is going to help. No amount of contradictions that you can point out will ever help. They'll always just turn themselves into a pretzel and start doing mental gymnastics for you. So that's never going to help. But if there are any Christian, you know, nationalists or fundamentalists that want to debate the Bible, Christianity, come on the show. Let's do it, man, because I'm all about disassembling this stuff from the ground up and let people decide for themselves what makes more sense. You may defeat me. You may kill me in the debate, but I'm going to try my hardest to point out the other side to your story and present another case, right? Just like so many thousands of atheists on YouTube are doing. Everyone's doing it. And then you've got Christian apologists doing it. It's fair game. So we can have these kind of discussions and debates. And I think it's worth doing, especially when we see a growing cult coming up with their hatred and vitriol against immigrants, against people of different races and religions. You know, they're a movement. They're doing what they got to do in America. We can do the same thing. We can, you know, refute all of that crap. I can, and I will. So any Christian out there that wants to debate that kind of stuff, let's do it. This weekend on Sunday at 8 p.m., there's going to be a debate between my co-host, Sophia. She's a mystic. She's going to be debating Diesel from Empathy Respect about, do we need Christianity to build civilizations? So they'll be debating that on Sunday. You know, I've been debating a few Christians on here as well. And I also talk about, you know, the alternatives to Christianity and materialism, which is a philosophy I call idealism. And I argue for that. Not that it's I know it's absolutely the true ontology of nature, but I make a, you know, an analytic argument, a philosophical argument, a logical argument for it. But what it does is it points to non-duality. So whether you're an idealist or not, non-duality is the main driver for what's going to keep us cohesive, you know, and build a better community, I think. When we start seeing each other as on different tribes, different teams, you know, the other, that's what kind of fuels this kind of thinking as well. But there's another perspective we can all get with called non-duality. And that's a way to kind of look at ultimately everything is connected. The world is connected as one thing. It's very spiritual, but it doesn't require beliefs in supernatural, magic, hocus pocus. It doesn't require any of that. Now we've got the philosophy of idealism. Some people think that's really woo-woo or whatever, and it's really not, because consciousness is the first thing we know exists. So I'm building on something we know to be the case, which is firsthand primary experience. And from that, you know, we can derive non-duality very easily. And I think that sort of stuff is very um, you know, important. It's very important. And by the way, thank you so much. Objective Ethics just jumped on. Please plug my debate Friday night. Should the Bible be the grounding for society? 10 p.m. Eastern on 21st Century Minds YouTube channel. Yes, I'm definitely going to watch that. And thank you so much for the reminder, because this really works towards that end, of educating people about um, a healthy body politic and a healthy belief system that you can build that on, right? Certain forms of Christianity, Islam, are just not going to work towards a better society, in my opinion. And that's because my goals for society is one that's based on reason, rationality, inclusiveness, non duality. And this sort of fundamentalism doesn't cohere with that. And so rather than try to use the state or use the government to silence them or use violence to silence these people, I'm not for that. Take it to the marketplace of ideas, and let's the demand win out. If people can see the reason and more rational position as the better position, that being Christianity or non-Christianity, so be it. Let the people figure it out, but at least let's make the best argument on each side. And it's being played out on YouTube and on the internet daily, every day for years now. And it seems like atheism, non-belief, agnosticism seems to be growing. They call them the nuns, as in none, no religion, identifying as no religion. Maybe they're a deist, maybe they're a pantheist, maybe these people are agnostics, maybe these folks are spiritual, not religious. All of those things are a lot more healthier and human than this artificially seeded evil called Christian nationalism or Sharia law. These sort of things are just ways to dominate your fellow man. And it does not go well for societies to survive in. They always end up, imploding. You know what I mean? And so, we do what we can here to speak about reasonable things, and go off the facts and the truth and try to discover those sort of things, right? So if you like that kind of stuff, please like and subscribe to the channel. I obviously want to grow this community. It's not a very popular position to be about against, the system, against the matrix. It's not very popular. Everybody likes their appearances. Everybody likes the world as it is, getting lost in your doom scrolling, getting lost in the violence and the shock value of today. And not many people like to talk about the deeper things that could be the root of solutions and pointing out the root of problems. People don't like to do that. It requires thinking, and a lot of people are just really lazy. And so they find these sort of discussions and YouTube channels kind of boring, so I understand. But what I really want to see is our society grow and become more curious, become more imaginative, and start to really embrace the sublime. We've got, on the one hand, a society that's just full of, nihilistic consumerism. You only live once. Get what you can while you can. Enjoy everything you can. Get it as cheap as you can, any way you can, man. Get the cars, the clothes, the women, the drugs, the this, the that, the whatever. Even if it kills you. Even if it doesn't really give you what you thought, because it never really does. It's nihilistic consumerism on one hand. And then there's this super hyper rationalistic Phil Bro type stuff where people are so, hyper logical. They logic themselves into pretzels, arguing for, the logical case for presuppositional apologetics in Christianity. They're hyper logical about materialism and physicalism and how all there is just matter in motion and meaning is gone. And so now you see an upsurge to kind of fill that space these days. Alex O'Connor talks about that all the time, about, this lack of meaning in the world because we've had such a increase of hyper rationalism in our culture now in a lot of cases. And a lot of that fuels the nihilistic consumerism because, hey, if all we are is matter in motion, if all we're going to do is live today and die tomorrow, why not do as the Apostle Paul said and, eat and be merry, for tomorrow we shall die, right? I understand that. But look, there's a third way, and that's the one that I promote also on my channel. It's not just about defeating bad ideas, but it's also replacing them with better ones. Different perspectives. Anything that really drives itself towards unity and non-duality, I'm all for it. My preference is analytical idealism. That's just my preference, but there's panpsychism. Even some materialists look at, material monism. That's fine. And everyone is an epistemic idealist at heart, if you ask me my opinion. Everybody is, because everybody bases all of their ideas, all of their beliefs, all of their convictions, all of their behaviors on their own experiences, their own memory, their own current feelings, impulses. All of this stuff is experiential. It's called experiential knowledge. It's the thing that they know first and foremost. And this is what leads them to materialism, to religion, to anything, because they take the appearance so serious, though. Yeah, they're epistemic idealists, but at the same time, they're ontological dualists because they give so much credence and power to the appearance of duality, which on one hand is quite necessary. Otherwise, you'd be bumping into objects all day long if you didn't recognize the other. If you didn't have an ego, you wouldn't know what fork to put to what mouth. Right? You have to think for yourself. You have to protect yourself in this world. You have to take it seriously. But it doesn't mean that it's the ultimate truth. Scientifically, we know that non-locality is a thing. Entanglement is a thing, just on a very, fundamental level. Quantum field theory, if you want to appeal to science, if that's what gives you a permission slip to see non-duality, that's one way to do it. Another way is just to understand that if you are a materialist, we're all stardust. We're all made of the same composite matter, having an experience of itself. It's like Carl Sagan said, we are the universe looking back at itself. And that's what science does. Science is, we are part of the very thing that we're measuring. If we're molecules in motion, if we're just subatomic particles in motion, having an experience of existing, that seems pretty wild. But we're the same thing as the thing we're observing. If that same science, that we're building on, that idea on, is true, and we take it seriously, then it still comes back to a non-dualism, because we understand that non-locality is a thing. But there's a Nobel Prize handed out in 2022, and 3 high particle physicists um, you know, close the loophole with the Bell's theorem, and prove once and for all that local realism was false and that non-locality is a thing and quantum mechanics still wins. There's entanglement and all of that. Nobel Prize was handed out by a community of science, a scientific community, where most of them are physicalists. Now, one of the folks that actually won the Nobel Prize in 2022 is an idealist, but that stands to reason. It all points back to non-duality, and people get there in different ways. And I would say there's no really true way to get there that we know of. Idealism is a belief system. It's a worldview. It's just a model. It's another model, just like physicalism is, just like any other sort of thing. But it leads to non-dualism, which I think is very virtuous, and it helps to defeat poor dualistic narratives like Christian fundamentalism. It provides an alternative that's more rational, and we know that the Bible can't be taken literal. It can't be looked at as the complete word of God, of a God, because it's full of self-contradictions. It self-refutes. It's got all kinds of issues with it. So why in the world would we take that seriously? Objective ethics, how you doing, my brother?
Hey, family, I'm good. You know how it is.
Good, man. Good. Glad you jumped in, man. It's good to see you out there too. And I can't wait for the Friday night debate. I am so looking forward to that, bro.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I got spent last week or this weekend getting ready. Oh,
Uh-huh.
looks like I got an echo. Is that coming through on you?
A little bit. But it seems to be better. Go ahead and say something now.
All right, let's see how that goes. Yeah, that is
Ah,
better. Okay,
that's better. Yep. That is better.
still a little bit of a delay on my end.
Try to if you have a tab open, you might have a tab open with the speaker on, so you might want to just close that tab out.
Okay, let me jump out, fix my
Okay.
settings, and then jump back in.
Okay, cool. Yep. Objective ethics. He's the guy I was telling you about. He was actually on the show this weekend introducing himself and some of his views, and we were talking about consciousness in the brain and things like that. And he mentioned that he was going to be doing a debate this Friday with a Christian apologist. Let me pull that up if I can. Actually, I don't have it ready because I got to scroll up. But yeah, it's going to be this Friday. I'm going to put it, it's in my description on my last video, and I'll put it on this one too, just to make sure whoever comes back and reviews can see that, so that by Friday you can watch this debate. And yeah, all you really have to do is kind of understand their book. If you understand their book, their basis, and you can get them to actually read their book, because they hate reading their book. That's one of the things they hate to do, because it opens up a can of worms for them, like slavery, like genocide, like all the things I had discussed before, supremacy. It really opens up a bag of worms, and they don't really want to talk about it. So what they do now is they try to gaslight you and say, oh, you don't have any reason or grounding to have an opinion. And so that's how they gaslight you, to shut you up. Hey, Objective, let's see how you sound.
All right, does that sound any better?
Yes, that sounds a lot better.
Still getting feedback on my end, but if you could hear it clearly, then I'll just carry on. I'm not going to be on that long anyway.
Okay, yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay.
So are you ready for the debate Friday?
Yeah, I got like I was trying to say, I got this weekend. I got everything finished up, and I got my opening statement, closing statement, and all that. And I went ahead and practiced it a few times to make sure that I'm within the time limits. And I'm gonna cook, bro. It's gonna be a really good performance.
Good, man. I can't wait to see it. I know you're going to do great. Um, it's very obvious. All you really have to do, like I was just saying, is if somebody just knows a little bit about the Bible, at least key areas, then they can really undermine a lot of this fundamentalist bullshit pretty easy. Like even just you could do it just with Jesus not being in the line of David just refutes the entire thing. Just that alone.
Yeah, it's interesting because the timing and all this, the debate itself, he wanted to do it specifically about government and politics.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to make sure that we address morality. So we came to a compromise for the title that you read off. Should the Bible be used for the grounding for society? And that does tie directly into government because governments are what we use to organize societies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Creating
Right.
laws and things of that nature. So it's a direct correlation. It's a 1-to-1, really, almost. And we set this up over a month before. In fact, we've been working on getting this set up for almost 2 months now. And the fact that this whole thing's
Mm.
happening with Charlie Kirk, the timing is just perfect, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it really is. And it seems like it's really heightened these days. Um and even, from the president on down. I mean, people are being fired for talking, crap about Charlie Kirk, and that's considered hate speech and people are losing their jobs, but yet somehow the Christian nationalist message isn't hate speech somehow. Even though they do call for violence and of course they straddle the line, so it's a gray area, so maybe that there's a case to be made for that. But still, I don't see how firing people for having, they didn't do that. If the whole idea is to make society safer and to calm down the rhetoric, then why don't they apply that same thought to the advertisers? The algorithm feeds off negativity and the things about Charlie Kirk and stuff like that. Why don't they crack down on advertisers?
It's so interesting. I think we mentioned this last time I had the pleasure of speaking with you. By the way, I really appreciate you guys having me on the other day. You're very gracious hosts and very intelligent, and you guys have so much to offer this social media space. There's so much drivel and nonsense. That's just a waste of time out there. And the stuff that you guys are doing is substantive, and I think it really matters. So I was grateful to be a part of it. This the, the whole concept of, sorry, I'm really not supposed to be awake this early. I had to help my wife out with something, so I just saw you were on. But this idea that these guys are using these very loaded words. They killed Charlie Kirk. It's
Mm-hmm.
us against them. You know what I mean? There was
Mm-hmm.
one suspect. It wasn't a they issue. So when they say they killed Charlie Kirk, what they are they talking about? You know what I mean? Very
Mm-hmm.
loaded language there. The
Yep.
other thing I noticed is I don't know if I mentioned this. I think we might have gone over this when I talked to you before, but as an independent centrist, I am really, really set in the middle. And I am watching this pendulum swinging both ways, from left to right, from left to right. And I remember that, the people on the left got really upset with the people on the right when the transgender thing got a lot of traction over the last, 4 years in particular, 4 to 6 years. And when the conservatives were not willing to use pronouns, then suddenly this kind of became a hate speech issue. And they wanted
Mm-hmm.
to cancel people, they wanted to silence
Mm-hmm.
people, and the people on the right were crying about it. Oh, they free speech and all this stuff. And all of a sudden now the pendulum has swung the other way, and the people on the quote unquote left are, even some of them are celebrating this Charlie Kirk thing, but other people are just being critical of Charlie Kirk. Like myself, we talk about this. I'm not celebrating anything that happened, but I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
sit there and pretend that I thought Charlie Kirk was this great humanitarian or anything else for that matter. I think he was dishonest and disingenuous, and I didn't like his debate tactics. He basically was out there just gaslighting a bunch of college kids, frankly,
Mm-hmm.
pushing very dangerous and harmful rhetoric, in my opinion. And the people on the right want to cancel them. They
Mm-hmm.
want to get them fired and stuff. And now people on the left are like, free speech, free speech. And I'm just looking at this thing going, literally, this is how this whole thing has been going for more than decades. This is how it's always been, especially in America with this bipartisan political system we have. One side does something, the other side complains about it, and then the other side does the exact same thing they were complaining about, and then the other side complains about. It's so wild as an
Yeah.
outside observer, basically watching this happen in real time, and it blows my mind.
Yeah, it does me as well. It's people are very unprincipled. Because I always say that the libertarian side of me is always saying that be careful to use the government gun against your enemies because that same gun can be pointed back at you later.
So
You
true.
yeah, you just open up the precedents to use the government to your own ends, and we're the kind of government we switch out leaders every 4 years. We shuffle in a new administration and it's going to swing back and forth. So now, say the left opens up cancel culture for the government. Well, now that the right is in, now that the new administration is in, the Republicans, they're going to use that same precedence against you now to silence you. And they don't like that. Then all of a sudden they're free speech advocates and stuff like that. And there's no principle because it just really depends. Everything is sort of relative. That relativistic thinking, which is very tribal, it's very irrational, it's incoherent, it's inconsistent, it's internally self-refuting when you look at the history and how they apply the rules unevenly. So that's why we have to get back to principles. We have to get back to educating the body politic, man. They're never going to understand these principles unless they're taught that stuff in the beginning. Right now, it's just childish thinking at play, and I see it at on jobs. I see it even within my family. They're like, "Oh, the Democrats, they're canceling us now. What a bunch of crybabies!" And then as soon as the other side does it, oh, they're mad now. When we do it, it's a problem. It's like, no, you're missing the whole point.
Oh, you're absolutely right. One of the worst things, there was a lot of bad things. I'm not a fan of Trump by any stretch of the imagination, but I certainly did not like Biden either. And when Biden essentially weaponized the FBI against Trump, and that's exactly what he did, like it or not. He really sent the FBI after Trump, who was a political opponent, and it set this precedence that we are going to regret for the next several presidencies. Trump is now doing the same exact thing. He's weaponizing ICE, he's weaponizing the FBI, and he's just literally just taking a playbook right out of the previous administration. And
Hmm.
it goes back and forth and back and forth. You mentioned something. Well, there's a couple things I don't want to. Before I jump into that, let me just focus on this here because what's happening in my opinion, and I'm not about conspiracy theories, and I'm not trying to push any conspiracy theory out on your channel or anywhere else for that matter, but we have a tragic event here. And even if it's not by design, the right wing government is literally just using this as cannon fodder against the
Hmm.
left. And it is insane. And I'm not saying that this is all set up intentionally, right? I will say there's some very suspicious stuff. I don't know if you've been following the news and what happened with the whole situation with the crime scene. Have you seen any of that stuff?
No, I haven't even seen it yet.
So there's a guy who's actually a conservative himself who noticed that there's some very suspicious behavior that's surrounding this. A lot of suspicious details. Right after Charlie Kirk was murdered, um, before the police or anybody else can get to the scene, people obviously we're in a day and age where everybody's got a camera phone, right? A phone on their
Hmm.
camera. Well, somebody was filming the Turning Point USA's road crew, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
and they literally, whether they did it intentionally or just out of pure ignorance, contaminated the crime scene. And for all intents and purposes, it looks like they removed key pieces of evidence before the police could get there. And this is all on camera. So, like a guy who sets up the stage, he took the chair that Charlie Kirk was sitting in, that he just got shot in, right after
Mm-hmm.
they took his body out and they're cleared, people are running out and it's starting to empty out stuff before the cops could get there. And he used that chair in place of a ladder to climb up, and there actually is a camera that was right behind Charlie Kirk that could have gotten a lot of detailed information about entry wound, exit wound. Was there a close-up shooter? Because there's some questions about, with the way the round went through his neck, the amount of damage that was done. Was it really a high-powered rifle? There's just a lot of questions about that. And there was a camera that was right behind Charlie Kirk that could have actually answered a lot of those questions. And he got up there and removed that camera and took
Mm.
it away. But like I said, there's just a lot of really weird things. The school, they laid a new concrete foundation down where the incident happened within like 24 hours of it happening, before any kind of real forensics. They should have been doing days worth of forensics. You know what I mean? I mean, when you get a school shooting or something like that, they shut the school down for a week or more while they're doing all these different forensics and stuff like that. And this
Mm.
Charlie Kirk
Mm-hmm.
thing was a major issue, and they had completely rebuilt that area, remodeled it and everything within like less than 48 hours after the event. They've already laid new concrete down, and a lot of forensics will be gone now. There's a trap
Mm.
door that was exposed right there at the where somebody may have possibly. So again, I'm not trying to push conspiracies, but there's just a lot of really weird details that are starting to come to light. The other issue is that if you look at this guy, this Tyler Burke or whatever his name was, if you watch his reaction to the whole thing, the court proceedings and stuff like that, he does not look like. I don't know. I mean, look at the way he's behaving compared to the guy who just literally tried to stab himself in the neck last night. Right? Do
Mm.
you hear about
Mm-hmm.
that? The
No,
Trump
I
guy
didn't
that.
even. No, I didn't hear about that either, man.
Okay, so you know that there was that guy from last year before the election who tried to um, assassinate Donald Trump on the golf course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he just had his day in court, and he was found guilty on all 5 charges. And he tried to stab himself in the neck with a pen in the courtroom.
Mm.
And that's the kind of reaction you would expect to see. Maybe not that extreme, but you know what I mean.
Right.
For somebody
Something
who's
like
in
that.
this,
Yeah.
yeah, and this Tyler Burke, like he literally looks like he just can't figure out why his pizza showed up cold. If you know what I mean,
Right.
like you look at the
Right.
expression, he's like completely emotionless, and he has no clue what's going on around him. It looks like it's just all weird, man.
Mm. So you're kind of thinking maybe he was set up.
Well, again, I don't want to push it as a specific conspiracy, but it certainly does not look like things are on the up and up.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the way that this feeds into the right wing agenda so
Mm-hmm.
perfectly, that is really concerning. They used to say, uh, if it looks like shit and it smells like shit, it's probably
Mm-hmm.
some shit around somewhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he could have been sacrificed for the greater cause. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me with these people, man. They're very cult like. They're very cultish, and it's very weird how Sophia mentioned to me that it's against the law for people to go off the grid and create like a little community, a cult. Yet here we go with a giant organization like this that's just able to do what they do, and they're just a giant cult. It's just kind of weird how things work. And it wouldn't surprise me if Charlie Kirk was a fall guy for the greater cause. I've heard that. I think Candace Owens is on about stuff like that as well. And it wouldn't surprise me. Like I said, I don't know. I'm just now hearing about a lot of this stuff. But it wouldn't surprise me, man, at this point.
Well, like I say, whether it's intentional or not, and we'll find out more in the coming days and weeks and stuff. But even if it's just a complete coincidence, it's just a situation that happened. This guy's a crazy dude who took a really dark path to accomplish his own goals. The government it fits perfectly into the right wing narrative, and they are using it to the fullest extent. I mean, that funeral service looked more like a political rally than it did a memorial service. That was wild, and I'm not uh, denigrating politicians' right to attend funerals and to have personal lives and friends and stuff, because they certainly do. They're human beings like anybody else. But that was a clear effort to push the Charlie Kirk political agenda, and to bring, to push Christian nationalism. And I
Hmm.
mean, I think that's so obvious, and it's really they're just blurring the lines so much of that stuff.
It should be investigated. Like, for me, um, the way that I always go up, just as a little guiding rule, not as a guide to what is obvious is necessarily true, but I always go with Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is probably the way to go. And it's probably more simple to say that just some guy shot him who was a trans, or who was influenced by his trans girlfriend, and that's just a much simpler, straightforward narrative. But as it turns out, reality is very rarely that simple. A lot of times, things are complicated in reality, and there are so many factors we're unaware of that cause things that are unseen, behind the scenes. But going in, I always appeal to Occam's razor. That way, you don't assume too many things, too many other things you have to explain, surrounding your theory. Like, you're introducing all these different factors that themselves need explanation, the same way. And so it becomes hard. And, the right will appeal to that when, if someone, like, say, a critic did come out and say, yeah, I think this was a setup. I think Charlie Kirk was a fall guy for the greater cause. And think about all, the crime scene. The camera was taken away. The crime scene was built over with other structures to hide all of these things. Then the way he acted in court. But you've got to explain all of these little factors on their own. Why did they build on that area? Why did they take the camera away? Who did it? Um, Look at psychology about behaviorism and how certain people, and, it's a lot of things. And in the right, obviously, the people who are endorsing for Charlie Kirk and the assassination sort of plot, they're going to say, oh, you're just irrational. The simplest explanation is it was just some left wing nut. You know, what would you
Well,
say to folks like that?
I agree with you 100%, and I'm very much, you and I are very similar in that way. I do also prefer the Occam's razor approach, and I think that, you know that's a good starting point for any situation. However, life is very complex. The real world we live in is very nuanced, and so you got to find a happy marriage between the complexity and the simplicity. And I think that's where things like philosophy come into play. It's very, but um, and the thing is, and again, I'm not trying to push any conspiracies. I want to make that very clear. I'm just observing some interesting things. Um, if if an organization was to plot something like this, with how much access we have to history through technology these days,
Hmm.
it's very easy to look back at history and say, you know what? Occam's razor is going to be the natural approach, the easiest thing for us to defend through deflection,
Hmm.
and so
Hmm.
overly complicating a situation is the best way to get away with a situation. Whereas before, like when you're like a kid and you're dealing with children or something like that, your kids, they make up a lie because they don't want to get caught for reaching their hand in the cookie jar, right? And so they make up all these crazy stories about how, some guy broke in the house, and then I don't know if you remember
Yeah.
Bill Cosby's routine about the when they were jumping on the bed, and the parents, I told you not
Hmm.
to be jumping on the bed. Like, no, some guy came in through the window, and
Yeah.
it just
Yeah. Yeah.
adds to, you just start building all these lies. But the
Yep.
point of it is that when we have this childlike mentality, we think, oh, we can't defend all these lies and stuff like that. But in that situation, our parents know better. They have way too much information. in a situation where now all of a sudden you have the ability to really diffuse by adding a lot of unfalsifiable claims or what appear to be unfalsifiable claims, it becomes a brilliant way to cover up your tracks. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? By confusing the issue, because adults want to lean towards the scientific method. Adults want to give other adults the benefit of the doubt that they're not going to just overly complicate a situation because of logistics. And now, the more you overcomplicate something, the more you have to manage and all these other things. And there's a truth to that, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
it can work both ways.
It really can, and that was my point. Is that it's so hard to tell, and you raise a good point, like in today's world of technology and stuff. But it kind of reminds me, it's like before fluid dynamics was totally understood, right? Which is a very complicated sort of chaotic theory of fluid dynamics, how fluids flow. The at first, people said, look, molecules flow in one direction. Water's made of molecules. When they flow in that one direction, that would explain why water flows in a certain direction. That's the most simplest explanation. And using that Occam's razor approach, you would think it would lead to that truth, right? But as it turns out in fluid dynamics, you've got molecules going in all sorts of directions. Then there's other factors that weren't even plugged in to explain why we get water to flow in one direction. And it's not the story that we initially. It's very, very super complicated. That's why you can get a PhD just in that alone. Like there's so much to the topic, so much to that subject. And so, as it turns out, Occam's razor really didn't serve anybody any good to know the truth about fluid dynamics. The same thing with air molecules, the same thing with all kinds of things in nature. So, I always say I kind of agree with you that it's a good guide. It should be a good guide, but it's not necessarily set in stone. Occam's razor is not naturally set in stone.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And when you start talking about fluid dynamics and you mentioned um, air molecules as well, you're talking about hydrodynamics. That's really up my alley because as a boat manufacturer and an inventor, when I designed my hull, that's the medium was my boat, but I was working with those dynamic principles that you're talking about. And I
Hmm.
am certainly no expert. And I have two PhDs in that. But, I still, I
Mm.
mean, it's such a vast I'm not two PhDs. I'm sorry. I'm so tired. Two patents. I have two patents. My wife's like, you don't have two
Wow.
PhDs. You got, yeah, yeah. No, I've got two. Yeah, I've got two patents for my whole design. And but having a PhD or something like that in that field, you're getting into the field of physics. It's extremely complex. The mathematics gets so hard so fast. It really is. But in fact, it's because of hydrodynamics that when I debate people about the global flood myth, I focus on my own field of expertise, which is Noah's Ark, and I can explain how that craft was not seaworthy. And
No
there's big difference
rickets.
between, oh yeah, no, there's a big difference between floating, something that'll float on the water, and something that's actually seaworthy. But
Mm.
because a lot of people don't build boats, they don't know what they're talking about. They read the story and then they might do a modicum of research and say, "Oh, well, 6-to-1 length to beam ratio made out of wood, it's got to float." Well, of course it's going to float right up until you
Hmm.
overload it with animals and food and fresh water. And then even on flat water, it wouldn't float because the downward pressure would exceed the upward pressure. And there's all the whole mathematics and science behind it. You know what I mean? And buoyancy and stuff like that. But when you mentioned the fluid dynamics, when the waters came up from the depth, the physics that would be involved with something like that, and it refers to what's known as the heat problem. And there's so much to that, but you're talking about now waves that would be literally miles high, and they would be supersonic, and they would be
Mm.
dynamic, right? People think of the ocean because they watch the tide come in and they watch the tide go out, and they think the ocean is moving in kind of this linear direction that you're talking about, where Occam's razor says, oh, the fluid must be working in the tides. They go in and they go out, and they're very linear. But when you start opening up depths all over the place, and you've got now earthquakes and all these things that cause tsunamis, right, in tidal waves, and those mile high supersonic waves are coming from 2 or 3 different directions at the same time. I mean, nothing. A
Mm,
U.S. battleship would survive something like that. You know what I mean? Much less an ark full of animals. I mean, it's physically, literally impossible from that standpoint alone. But
yeah, it's a miracle.
I'm sorry, I kind of went on a tangent there. You start talking about hydrodynamics, you got me going.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just the point is that um, Occam's razor is a great guide, I think, because then you don't throw in a bunch of assumptions that you can't really back up, and it makes your theory or model less certain on a scale, I guess you could say. Um, but as it turns out, most things in reality just aren't that simple, and that's kind of the case that I think fundamentalist Christians try to make against those who believe in evolution, for example. Like evolution is not very parsimonious. It's not very, it's very complicated, right? But we know it's true. But, Christians will say, well, isn't it just much simpler to say that, there wasn't all these, factors in nature and adaptation and genes and the way things work in the environment, and then all this time we have to assume and all of these things. Why don't we just say God made everything at once and boom, we're done? The most simplest explanation. But then they forget that even their God now entails an infinity worth of things to explain, So it's just it's a real tricky thing, and people, I think that Occam's razor has its place when it comes to model building, but it isn't necessarily set in stone. So I agree with you 100%. And yeah, that's a really good point about Noah's Ark, and stuff like that. And most people, that's the whole root of the entire issue, I think, even surrounding this topic altogether, is most people are just not familiar with stuff. I've been debating people online about the Charlie Kirk situation and the Christian nationalist movement. And a lot of people are saying, oh, it's just, why don't people have a right to, why are you pointing out that they're negative? Why not point out the negativity in the Catholic Church or other religious organizations? Freedom of speech. Why are you against freedom of speech? And I'm just really making the video to make the point that no, I'm for freedom of speech. In fact, I'm for debating the Christian nationalists and fundamentalist Christians all day long, and take it to the marketplace of ideas. But I'm also about bringing out the facts. Christian nationalism has a white supremacist basis, and that's the part that people don't want to accept. But if people knew that, I think most of these Republicans would not be so quick to defend the whole Charlie Kirk movement the way they do, because I think that they're very ignorant of what Christian nationalism really is.
Well, unfortunately, and I do agree that the discussions are the most important tool that we have for changing the future, because the reality is it's probably not going to change your future or my future, but we're
Right.
hoping that future generations will look back at these discussions, especially with the advent of the internet. This is such a powerful tool for shaping the future, because they can look back at this stuff, and hopefully rationality will eventually take hold in the larger number of people, and they'll say, wow, this stuff is really dysfunctional, divisive, leading us. It's obviously these dangerous and harmful rhetoric has led us to where we're at right now. And when the world gets to such a destitute place, they're going to have to, something's going to have to give, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's you would hope, and the only way that we can, do anything about it is grassroots, just trying to change the culture from within the culture itself. I think that's how most of your big changes in the world happen, is that it happened from the grassroots level. Rarely ever top down. I may be wrong about that, but it seems like the powers that be sort of feed off the cultural paradigms of the time and culture.
No, you're
Um,
absolutely right. It's the Rosa Parks that changed the world.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's really what I'm trying to promote, is just let's debate passionately. And man, Friday, I can't wait to see it. 10 p.m. Eastern, so that'll be 9 p.m. my time. Again, folks, tune in to the 21st Century Minds YouTube channel this Friday. I'll put the link in the description, again, as I did on my last video, so we can, so you guys can click into it Friday. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm gonna blast it on all my social media as well. And yeah, more discussion, more debate. That's what it's all about, brother. I appreciate it. And it's been an hour. I have to actually get ready to do some work, but I appreciate the conversation. I just wanted to kind of drop those thoughts and kind of share it while I'm waiting to get started this morning. But thank you so much, Objective, for jumping in again. And hopefully I'll see you again on the show on Saturday if you want to tune in. I'll be watching you as well on Friday. And again, Sunday, there's a debate with my mod, Sophia and Diesel from Empathy Respect. It's going to be the same topic pretty much that you're doing on Friday.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. We could do a debate review if you want on Saturday, and
Yes.
maybe Sophia can take some of the stuff that we went over in my debate and use that. Now she's probably already prepared her opening statements and stuff like that, but she will have an opportunity to see how I handled the situation and see if she wants to adopt any of that or just see what kind of
Yeah.
arguments she's going to have to deal with. No, I don't want to be rude, but I'll jump on Saturday
Okay.
and we can finish up because there's a lot of things you touched on about nihilism and stuff that I'd like to talk about.
Yes, yes, yes. We need to do that. Yeah, so Saturday, let's do it. Let's keep that in mind. So Saturday we can also talk about that. We'll have a lot to talk about, man, and definitely I think Sophia could really glean some ideas for her debate on Sunday. So all right, folks, again, like I said, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let's grow, let's make moves, let's make a difference. And you guys stay stoked and stay awesome. And until next time, man, we'll see you on Friday. Peace.